All right, so now we're going to talk about shifts and reflections with exponential graphs. So let's take a look here. We have y equals 2x minus 3. Our shifts and our reflections are going to follow the same pattern as they do for any other function that we have talked about. Your horizontal shift will be next to the x, and this out here will be your vertical shift. So in this case, I have no horizontal shift, but I have a vertical shift here of -3. So I'm going to now mark the new origin with an x. So my new origin is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, -3. I'll mark it with an x right there. I'm going to now graph all of my points from this new origin. So I'm going to now graph my parent function from that new shifted origin. And if you remember from my other video, if we did an XY table and did 0, 1, 2, -1, -2, then if we plugged in 0, we'd get 1. If we plugged in 1, we'd get 2. 2, we'd get 4. -1, I'd get 1/2. And -2, I'd get 1/4. You don't need to write an XY table from now on. You could probably do those values in your head. So from here, this point here, I'm going to graph a 0, 1. From this x, I'm going to go over 1 up 2, 1, 2. I'm going to go over 2, 1, 2, up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go over -1, 1/2. I'm going to go -2, 1/4. And you can see now that this graph is going to start high and it's going to come down. It's going to hug this line right here. So now you can see from this graph that your asymptote is right here now at -3. So this vertical shift will also tell you where your asymptote is going to be. Forgot my arrow up here. Here we go. All right, let's try one with exponential decay. So now we know that +2 here is going to be my vertical shift. It's also going to be where my asymptote is. So let's go ahead and just write in that asymptote right now so we know where it is. And now that I've graphed that, I'm just going to graph the parent function. And just for now, until we're again more comfortable with it, let's kind of write a quick XY table. 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. If I plug in 0, I'll get 1. If I plug in 1 now, I'm going to get 1/3. If I plug in 2, I'll get 1/9. -1, I'll get 3. -2, I'll get 9. So now if I wanted to graph those points, again, I'm going to put an X where my shifted origin is. I'm going to graph these points from that shift. So 0, 1, 1, 1/3, I'm going to estimate it. 2, 1/9, I'm going to estimate it. -1, 3, and -2, 9. I'll be off my graph, but it'll be up here somewhere. And now I can see that my graph is going to come down like this. It's going to hug my asymptote and go like that. All right. Now we see here I have a value next to my x, so that's going to actually give me my horizontal shift. So now I have no vertical shift, but I have a horizontal shift. So if I have no vertical shift, we know my asymptote is going to be right here at the x-axis. I'm going to put an x where my shift is. So now this is negative, and remember it's always the opposite sign when you're next to x. So my shift will be at +3. So there's my new origin. And now I'm going to graph my points from that new origin. So again, I'm going to do this now without a table because we've done it often enough now. 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I could go 3, 8 if I wanted to, but I can see here again what it's going to do. -1 will be 1/2. -2 will be 1/4. So I'm going to come down like this. I'm going to hug my asymptote. And this is what this graph will look like. Let's take both shifts, and now we have a base of 3, so we have to pay attention to that. So now my asymptote is at -5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My new origin is going to be at -4, -5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right here. And now if I plugged in 0, I would get 1. If I plugged in 1, I would get 3. 1, 2, 3. If I plugged in 2, I would get 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If I plug in -1, I'll get 1/3. If I plug in -2, I'll get 1/9. And you can see then that my graph is going to start up here and come down and around and hug this asymptote. And that is what that graph will look like. Let's talk a little bit about reflections. Now, if you remember, I've always called that A value a Y multiplier because it's going to take all of my Y's and multiply it by whatever is out there, in this case, a negative sign. So again, let me just jot down very quickly our standard XY table without that negative, 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. I would get 1, I would get 2, I would get 4, 1/2, 1/4. But now because I have that Y multiplier, these will all be negative. So now my origin is here. I have no shifts. So now if I'm going to graph 0, I'm going to graph -1. And if I graph 1, I'm going to graph -2. 2, I'm going to graph -4. -1, I'll graph -1/2. -2, I'll graph -1/4. And you'll see now my graph is going to look like this. It's just going to be a reflection of the original graph. Why don't you go ahead and try this one on your own? This has a lot going on. It has a horizontal shift, a vertical shift, and a reflection. Why don't you pause the video and try this, and then restart the video again. All right, so I'm going to graph my shift at +3, 1, 2, 3, and +4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my new origin. If we do an XY table, 0, 1, 2, -1, -2, I'm going to have 1, I'm going to have 1/2, 1/4, 2, and 4. But again, these will all now be negative since I have a reflection. So I'm going to go 0, -1, 1, -1/2, 2, -1/4, -1, -1, -2, -2, -4, 1, 2, 3, 4. My asymptote will be right here where my +4 shift is, and my graph will come up like this and hug my asymptote. All right, and let's take a look at one last example, where now instead of having a reflection, I have a Y multiplier of 3. I have no shifts, so right there is going to be my origin. Normally, I would start at 0, 1, but I have a Y multiplier now of 3, so I'll start at 0, 3, 1, 2, 3. Normally, if I would go over 1, I would go up 2, but I have a Y multiplier of 3, so I'll go over 1, up 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would go over 2, up 4, so now I'm going to go over 2, up 12, but I will be off my graph, but we'll just kind of draw it in up there somewhere. If I had -1, I would have 1/2, but I have to multiply that by 3, so -1, I'll have 3/2, so that'll be about there. -2 would have 1/4, so if I multiply that by 3, I'm going to have 3/4, so it'll be about there. And I know that this is my asymptote right here, so I know I'm going to get closer and closer to my asymptote, so it's going to come down and around like this and look like that. If you have any questions, let me know.